Hello and welcome to the NerdX Geek channel. I'm your host Dax, and in this video I'll be talking about the Eternals movie and how much it differs from the comics, mainly the characters. Obviously, this video will contain spoilers for the Eternals movie, so if you haven't seen it yet, you can click away from this video and come back later. Let me just start off by saying I'm completely fine with the gender swapping and the race bending of the characters. I actually agree with the gender swapping, because the Eternals in the comics had only like two or three females, and in the main characters, I think it was only Cersei and Thena and maybe Thena's mother, and the movie didn't just gender swap and race bend. They entirely changed almost everything in the comics. Let's start with their origin story. In the comics, the Celestials came down to Earth and experimented on a bunch of monkeys, and this branches out into three different species: the Eternals, the humans, and the Deviants. All of them have intelligence and they go to war and all that stuff, and the Eternals live on Mount Olympia. But in the movie, apparently the Eternals are some cosmic beings created by the Celestials in a planet called Olympia. It's not even a planet, it's later revealed that it's like a giant science lab in space. In the comics, there are over hundreds of Eternals, but they don't mention it, so I don't think there are. There's just these 10 people, but there should be more. I mean, we kind of saw more in that Cersei vision, but I don't think so. And they also heavily nerfed them. Like in the comics, every single Eternal have some form of super strength and durability, and the Deviants can't just kill them through physical strength. The Deviants have to use like brain mines and all that. And in the movie, they only have like one power set each, except for Icarus. And the Deviants have no intelligence. They're just random monsters that the Eternals fight to look cool. In the comics, the Deviants want to rule for a reason. They're villains for a reason. They have intelligence, they can speak, they create weapons to defeat the Eternals. They have a city underwater named Lemuria, and they have warlords and priests and leaders and all that stuff. So yeah, the Deviants were pretty disappointing in the movie. And the Celestials, they didn't change much with the Celestials, except their looks. Arishem the Judge looked a lot more like Isan the Searcher, because his eyes looked completely different in the comics. Well, let's move on to the Eternals now. Icarus. Icarus is the main character in the comics. He's like the primary focus, and he's probably the most comic accurate character in the movie, until he wasn't. In the movie, he's the main villain, kinda. They pulled a Watchman Ozymandias on him and did a complete 180 on his comic counterpart. Ozymandias killed the comedian, Icarus killed Ajak. Ozymandias wants to wipe out a bunch of people so others can survive. Icarus wants to wipe out Earth so other civilizations can survive. So yeah, I didn't like that departure either, and his redemption at the end doesn't really make sense. I mean, one minute he was trying to kill everyone, and the next he's in the Unimind, right? Like what happened? Like he just looked at Cersei with his laser eyes, and then all of a sudden he's in the Unimind. I mean, come on. But I did like the fight scene with him and Makari. It's like a Superman versus the Flash fight that we never got. And also his relationship with Cersei, I don't think it ever happened in the comics, although in Neil Gaiman's run, Sprite did mention that Cersei slept with every straight male in Olympia. So yeah, she probably slept with Icarus too. And also in the comics, there's an actual deeper and sad meaning to why Icarus is named Icarus. He had a son named Icarus who couldn't fly and got fake wings, and he flew too close to the sun and fell into the ocean and died. This was an actual thing in the comics, and in the movie they made it as a story that Sprite made up. So yeah. Moving on to Cersei. Cersei is probably one of my favorite Eternals in the comics, because she's this character that does things for the fun of it. She likes parties and she barely takes part in big Eternal battles. She rescues random suicidal people and she's amused by this guy named Sam Holden. Her movie counterpart was basically the main character, and the rest of it doesn't really happen. She's also completely changed. She's in love with this Dane Whitman character, the Black Knight character from the comics, and she's a museum professor kinda, and she's a lot less powerful here. In the comics, she does eventually get together with Black Knight, but she also played around with Makari a bunch of times, and she could easily turn a deviant into a tree rather than doing it on impulse and finding it difficult to do it. So I guess I'm fine with Cersei's character in the movie. I much prefer the comic, but the movie is okay, I guess. Anyways, next is Thena. Thena is the daughter of Xurus, who was the leader of the Eternals and was never mentioned in the movie. And Thena in the movie had this dementia-type disease called Mad Worry that only affects the Eternals. This is entirely MCU original and I don't think it ever existed in the comics. Thena in the comics is ridiculed for sleeping around with deviants, especially the deviant warlord Crow. And the 1985 Eternals series focused a lot on that, and it was amazing. And Crow apparently doesn't exist in the MCU. Yeah, he doesn't, cause that one tentacle deviant that could speak was not Crow. He's a completely different character named Crow. Thena also took in two deviants under her wing. They're Reject and Carcass. Reject later got under Kingo's wing, so he became a samurai, and Thena in the movie was fine. She looked cool and her relationship with Gilgamesh was pretty sweet. So, moving on, Ajak. Ajak kinda took the place of Xurus in the movie in being the prime eternal. Her only abilities in the movie was that she could heal herself and she can talk to Arishem. Ajak in the comics also has the ability to talk to celestials and he's much stronger than his counterpart in the movie. So, yeah. And then there's Sprite. Sprite in the comics is a prankster and he's like Loki. He became a woman later on after he died, and Sprite in the movie is very less of a prankster and she's more of a sarcastic character, and her being in love with Icarus is probably taken from the Neil Gaiman series where Sprite was in love with Cersei. And yeah, except for the fact that she pulled the same trick we saw Loki pull 1,000 times. I actually liked Sprite in the movie, and I just wish she had more abilities. Moving on to Makari. Makari in the comics doesn't have a lot of development. He was the main character for the Neil Gaiman series and he had relationships with Cersei throughout the comics, and he was also possessed by the Dreaming Celestial. I liked her character in the movie and her super speed effects are pretty awesome, and plus her brief relationship with Druik is pretty cute. So yeah. Moving on to Festos. Festos is not that different from his comic counterpart. He's probably the most comic accurate character, except for the fact that he's gay, but they didn't really confirm whether he's gay in the comics or not, so yeah. He's a weaponsmith and he's like the Tony Stark of the group, and I liked him. And so the next one is Druik. Druik is very much less evil in the movie, since in the comics he hates the Celestials and the Eternals don't, and he pulls evil schemes to try and kill the Celestials, but he died and then came back later and all that. And in the comics he also has fire powers and plus telepathic abilities, but in the movie he only had telepathic abilities. That was a disappointment, but I like how his character was written, so yeah. Moving on, Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is a very different from his comic counterpart, because in the comics he was first known as the Forgotten One, and then he became the Forgotten Hero in the Thor comics, and later he became a deviant spy until he finally became Gilgamesh. He's very different in the movie, but I love Don Lee's portrayal and yeah, I liked him. Kingo is probably the funniest character in the movie, with his butler guy Karun. He's not that different from the comics, except for the fact that he's a different race. There's race bending there. Like, he's a Japanese samurai movie star in the comics, while in the movie he's an Indian Icarus. He was really funny and I'm kinda disappointed he wasn't in the final fight scene. And lastly, there's the Unimind. It barely appeared in the movie. While in the comics it's a big brain and then it became this spiritual being. Well, I guess they didn't have enough CGI for that. I mean, some scenes in the movie, the CGI was really noticeable. Well, despite all the comic book disappointments, I actually enjoyed this movie and I give this movie a 7.5 out of 10. I thought the cinematography was amazing, the music is really awesome, and yeah. Thank you for watching this video. I make videos about movies, TV shows, Marvel, DC, Star Wars and all that, so subscribe to my channel if you're into that. Although I haven't really done anything on Star Wars, we'll have to wait until the Book of Boba Fett comes out. The trailer was awesome. And I also make AMVs sometimes, so check that out. And yeah, thanks for watching. I've been Dex, you've been the best. Hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and goodbye.